And here we are, and that's the Ligue 1 22-23 season preview. Jeremy Magan, of course, the host here, and Baptiste from Le Classic Pod joining me. How are you, Baptiste?
I'm great. Season's coming up. What's just great time to be excited about French football.
6-7 days, and we're in. And you've done the work already. Quite a few amazing threads on Twitter, Baptiste. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just it's helped me prep for this and get get just really enthusiastic about the upcoming season because I think there's a lot to like.
If you haven't read them, jump on Le Classic Pod on Twitter and give a read to the threads that Baptiste are doing on each club, basically analyzing what the club is, what to expect this season, the one to watch for each club, and the key players as well. It's a great read. So let's put the season into context. So Ligue 1 season 22-23 in France. I guess the main informations are obviously there's a World Cup in the middle of the season, November and December, which will mean that we're going to have a winter mercato, an off season that is going to last 2 months instead of a couple of weeks. And then at the end of the season, Ligue 1, who right now counts 20 clubs, will only count 18 clubs for 23-24. So four teams will be relegated, and only 2 from Ligue 2 will come to Ligue 1, which will make the bottom of the table very interesting. To talk about that long break that we're going to have during the Qatar World Cup, a month and a half of interruption, and you're smiling, I'm smiling too. There'll be a game, a Boxing Day game in Ligue 1. So Ligue 1 will start very quickly after the end of the World Cup, but there's going to be an opportunity there for clubs to basically restart. And in the context of 14 potentially be relegated, 14 being relegated at the end of the season, and all the teams that are going to fight against it, there's that chat in France that teams are being a little bit cautious, know that it's going to be 2 seasons more than 1 season, and there's a world that heads will roll when it comes to November. So straight off the back, Baptiste, how many coaches do you think get axed during that World Cup? Let's say before the World Cup and during the World Cup. What's your gut feeling? Because Ligue 1 is known for changing 14 coaches a season.
Yeah, before the World Cup, I think as in the first sort of couple of winning the first 10 games of the season, I can think of 3 that will go 3, and I can name them. I think Peter Bosch is. I have no idea. I think they'll do okay, but I think there's a disconnect there at the club for Peter Bosch. Igor Tudor, I'm not saying that because I don't think he can be a good manager. I think it's just he hasn't picked the players, and there's a lot. It's a tough ask, and there's Champions League football, and Marseille is volatile, so it'd be a difficult task for anyone. And then Bruno Irles at Troyes, there were some weird stories coming out about first day of preseason, 15 players turning up and going to their president saying, "Can you please sack our manager?" So that's never a good sign. And then, so I think they're the 3 I can think of. And then obviously there'll be some opportunistic sackings, I think. And it's interesting because I think there are some clubs that will be close to the bottom that I tend to see as quite stable actually, and not rushing into decisions. But even somebody like Régis Lebris at Lorient, if it doesn't start well, then Loïc Ferry might cut him loose. So there will be a lot of pressure. We could see a lot of changes. Yeah,
and that's it, right? With those 4 teams being relegated, presidents, owners will want to turn the tide quickly if there's a false start, or it's not going to be able to forgive. I mean, we've seen last year the terrible starts from Saint-Etienne and Bordeaux, and it landed them where it should have landed them, which is back in Ligue 2. Yeah, I have a feeling that between now and December we have 6-7 coaches that are gone, and the one that you mentioned, I think if they don't perform, they are definitely going to get the sack. But I also think the other way around. If Marseille, Lyon, actually perform, it will mean that Lille, Monaco, potentially Rennes won't perform, and those clubs have invested so much into their mercato that I think the coaches won't probably be given a lot of flack, let alone Christophe Galtier.
Yeah.
If he's not first with 10 points ahead of
Yeah.
everybody when it comes to the World Cup and first of his group in Champions League, winning 7 games out of 6, I think he's already in a delicate position because he came in without the respect. Supposedly, if he doesn't get the great result, he's not staying there much longer.
Yeah, I'd be less worried for Galtier in all honesty, because I think they're going to, they should walk all over Ligue 1. And I know he'll be judged on Champions League, but he's only got a 2-year contract. So I think that will be, 2-year contracts also mean that it's less expensive to sack them. But I'd be less worried for him. As somebody like Philippe Clément, the more you talk about it, if if the end of the season was just a flash in the pan, and I don't believe it was, because I think the way they played showed organization, and I don't think Chouameni is such a huge loss that they can't do well in Ligue 1. But
Big words.
Rybolovlev is famously impatient, and he nearly got rid of Clément in the first place, and Paul Mitchell, and I think certainly Clément is, but I think Mitchell is still at the club, so that there's a volatile owner there ready to get rid of his staff. I think at Rennes, I know even if they don't start really positively, and I've got them really high, but if they don't start really positively, I'd still struggle to see Genesio sacked. I think they're one of the clubs that I would qualify as very stable, and unless it would have to be a really catastrophic start to the season, I think, for them to get rid of Genesio. But never say
We're
never.
going to get into those top clubs soon, but yeah, I think it would just take an 8th place, and when you think about it, there are 7 clubs that, if they're playing well, could potentially be follow that teams. Anyway, that was a bit of a bit of fun to start us over, wondering who would get the axe if they don't perform. We're going to mention our 6th club that, potentially should change coach in the middle of the season if things go the way we think they're going to go for them, because we're going to do that first episode on the 6 teams that we think we're going to have to fight it out until the very end to avoid relegation, and potentially in those 4, I think we both think that 4 of them are going to survive. Give me your 6 team, Baptiste.
So I've got Ajaccio, Clermont, Auxerre, Angers, Troyes, and Montpellier as my 6.
Ooh, Montpellier.
Yeah.
I got Ajaccio, I got Auxerre, I got Clermont, I got Troyes, I got Angers, and I got Brest as my 6th team.
Yeah.
So the only difference that we have is Montpellier for Brest, right?
Yeah.
Oof, we're pretty.
I mean, my thinking for Montpellier is, and obviously the whole summer can heal, right? But they just had such a terrible run of form at the end of the last season. I know they've made some smart signings. I mean, they're a smart club, but I don't feel like it really. I think it just prolongs the status quo, and I just thought key players like Savanier looked absolutely tired physically and mentally at the end of the season, and they're very reliant on him. And now that they've lost somebody like Florent Mollet as well, who's a key player, I just think like I said, it's the summer can heal, and it can break that dynamic, or they come back and they haven't rejuvenated and they're heading downwards. And I felt more the latter than the former, unfortunately.
They have lost Florent Mollet. They have lost Junior Samba right back. That's probably the 2 important players that they've lost. They've lost Rémi Cabella, but he didn't really play with Montpellier in the last few months. They've recruited Sako, Kazri, Nordin, Mawassa, all players that are known in Ligue. And then a player from Nîmes Olympique, Théo Saint-Luce. I don't have them there, Montpellier, simply because I think that Dall'Olio is a very sound coach who likes to play football, and I like to think that a team who plays football will be rewarded eventually. And also, I do believe in those recruits. I think Arnaud Nordin just was itching to prove himself as a Etienne and just couldn't do it. and Montpellier, where the ball will arrive to him a bit more than in Saint-Etienne, might be a chance for him to finally shine. I think Wabi Kazri next to Teji Savanier can actually do a lot of damage. And then they were able to keep Mavidi. Hopefully they can keep him until the end of the transfer window, of course. But they were able to keep this striker who has shown some premises of real football IQ, finishing intelligence, and so hopefully they have a good season. I see them, I see them a little bit higher up. I see Brest, which is coached by the coach that used to coach Montpellier, Der Zakarian. I see Brest really struggling. I think Brest is a team that last year already, if it wasn't for a bit of a I don't even know how to call that, like a bit of a lucky spell from what's his name, Bizot, the keeper. I feel like they would have had a very hard time staying up to start with, and I feel like every time I see this team, I don't see the talent. Basically, I mean, they didn't finish that bad last year. Don't get me wrong. I think they finished just behind
12,
behind Lille, so 12, right? Yeah. But I don't know. I feel like it was all about defending and hoping for the best by defending a lot, which is something that Der Zakarian has tried to pull himself away from. But I feel like he fell right back into it. They've recruited Pierre Lesmelou, which is a player that I actually rate, who didn't do well in England because he went to Norwich and Norwich were relegated. Although he played quite a bit with Norwich, not starting every single game, but he had his chance and he didn't help them staying. And then they've also recruited Mathias Pereira-Lage from Angers, who's also, I guess, the epitome of the inconsistent player. They've recruited this young player from Celtic, Karamoko Dempele, who we were talking about offline and who made a bit of noise, a bit younger in his life. But yeah, I just don't believe in Brest.
I mean they lost Agoume as well, who was a big player for them, and Satriano went back after his loan, so that's a bit of a miss. But I like those signings you've mentioned. I think they're smart, they're solid Ligue 1 players. I mean, Brest they're not aiming for top 10, right? They're aiming for survival, frankly. But it's interesting because for me, I prefer Dalolio, for example, than Der Zakarian in terms of style, but I feel like Der Zakarian can coax a siege mentality if it needs to from his players, whilst Dalolio is, not a fair weather manager, but when it all goes well, it all goes really well, and when it goes badly, it goes really, really badly. And I'm not sure, and maybe that's because he sticks to his principles, and whether that's whether you have principles that you stick by or you're inflexible, I don't know. But I just see him in a crisis situation, finding life more difficult than someone like Der Zakarian. And so that's where, between the two, I personally lean more towards Brest than Montpellier, because they had a slightly better dynamic, and they've got a manager that I think can also, has no shame in saying, if I have to just park the bus for 3 games to get 3 draws, then I will do it, and those 3 points will save us. Whilst Dalolio is a little bit more of a football romantic, let's put it that way.
I'll play football and who cares about the result. Yeah, I guess I was a bit harsh as far as talent in Brest. The talent is there. I just don't see the football played well, because it'd be mean to say there's no talent. You have Belkebla, Honora, Mounier, Le Doiron, Cardona, Del Castillo, if he ever comes back to his level. There are players like Youssef Belaili. There are players that know how to play football. I just haven't seen any of that football really played last year. And defensively, I don't think that they're all there. Let's talk about the teams that we agreed on. I think the one that I don't have a doubt, you don't have a doubt, I don't think anybody has a doubt in the whole of France, is Ajaccio. It just looks like the club who's not in his era. It's an era of bigger club, and it's a small familial club who's just coming back from Ligue 2, who hasn't really recruited anybody that is supposed to be making an impact in Ligue 1, who, when they were in Ligue 2, were basically known for their defensive rigidity and not a great attack, but the second best defense or the best defense in the league. And as it's well known in France, it's always hard to go to play in Corsica anyway. But Ligue 1 is not Ligue 2. That power struggle is a bit different when it comes to Ligue 1, and without any slight to Ligue 2 player, real professionals, they won't have the same sort of issue with going to play in Corsica that might happen in Ligue 2. So it's hard, for Olivier Pantaloni, with all the affection that I can have for the guy. It's hard to imagine him staying the whole season in Ajaccio, although he's been there for 8 years now, so he's done his job for the Highland team. But it's very complicated to see this team staying in Liga.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they're not a Ligue 1 club, and that's not. I'm not saying that out of a desire to be harsh. It's just based on the infrastructure, based on they're not. You wouldn't see the progressive thinking that you'll see at other clubs. It has Ajaccio, like any Corsican clubs, and I don't want to generalize, but it clearly has its assets, right? I mean, you will get the siege mentality, you will get a really fiery atmosphere at home, players who going to give everything for the shirt. You're never going to doubt their commitment. They're just lacking the quality. I mean, considering their means, I kind of like the thinking behind some of their signings. I mean, Romain Amouma, Thomas Mangani, those are aging players, but players who are real good professional, still have some quality. I mean, Mangani was still starting for Angers last season. Has been a very regular, consistent player in Ligue 1 for the last 4 or 5 years. And Amouma has been troubled by injuries, but whenever he was able to play for Saint-Etienne, clearly had Ligue 1 quality still. So they're sort of low risk gambles from Pantaloni and Ajaccio, and I can understand the thinking behind it. I think it's just the rest of the squad. It's peppered with a few good players, and I think that again their signing of Mayembo from Le Havre is a smart one, but it's difficult to know where the goals are going to come from. It's difficult to know. I think their defensive record in Ligue 2 can be replicated to a certain extent in Ligue 1, and if you have a strong defense, you have a chance. But I just don't see any goals coming in, and that's going to be a real struggle. I think they're just not ready.
Last year, the goals were coming from Crasso, who had been loaned to Ajaccio, a proper Ligue 2 striker, and who's back on Ligue 2 now with Saint-Etienne. But yeah, there's names that if you follow Ligue 1 from afar, Gaëtan Courtet, Coutadeur, who was great at Le Mans back in 1992. But yes, it's complicated, I think, for Ajaccio, and I think anyone who follows Ligue 1 will imagine them going back down. We mentioned Auxerre. So Auxerre, I think, to me, is a team that will struggle, but I still see them staying in Ligue 1. I do see them staying in Ligue 1 though after they change coach, and that's my my little caveat for Auxerre. I think they're going to struggle at first because Jean-Marc Furlan is the epitome of the romantic football coach. As you were mentioning, he wants to play his style of football and he want it to work. But Ligue 1 is not Ligue 2. They've recruited, I guess, very, very little. They got Benoit Costil as a goalkeeper coming from Bordeaux, so it's a lot of experience and potentially an eagerness to get revenge after the season that he had last year. So it's probably going to be very important for Auxerre. They've kept their main talent. Talking about Gauthier 1, Gaëtan Charbonnier, although he's 33 now and he's never really proven anything in Ligue 1, but he's there. They've recruited Kaiz Ruiz Achil, the famous former prospect who didn't translate eventually, but who's only 19 years old, so technically he is definitely still a prospect. But it's a team that I think will play good football. If the results don't come, Furlan will get the axe, and I wouldn't be surprised if then them save themselves, or happy surprise, they work well and they end up doing enough with Furlan staying at head.
Yeah, I mean I've predicted them as 19th in my league table, but I'm actually more optimistic than maybe you are about Furlan. I think there's always good, and I know that also applies to Ajaccio, but I think they just have a distinct lack of quality in their side. But I'm always in favor of teams who have a common thread running through their team, have a cohesion, have a style of play, and that they stick to it. I mean, also, I think as a fan, having been a Fulham fan and having seen our teams be completely different from being in the Championship to the Premier League, I appreciate players who brought you up being given their chance. And that's because they have automatisms within the team. I think that just makes more sense. Um, so I think Auxerre, like I said, I've got the 19th. I think they can play that way because Ligue 1 is still relatively open. And I don't think Auxerre going to Brest, for example, is a game that they should feel particularly daunted about. I think anybody in the second half of the table is fair game, and a club like Auxerre should challenge that, should challenge those games. So I'm a little bit more optimistic. I think they have genuine quality and players who can improve. So Gauthien's improvement has been phenomenal over the last 2 seasons. I think players like Theo Pelnard, who came through the ranks at Bordeaux, will be a good player. I think you know uh, Kais Ruizatil, who knows? That's an interesting gamble. But they've got decent players here. Gaetan Perrin is there. I think they've augmented that with the likes of Shangama, sorry, on a free, who had a very good season in Ligue 2. So smart pieces of business, I think. Whether that just sets them up to make another run at Ligue 1 if they get relegated, I don't know. But I can see a hungry, talented players that fit Furlan's style, and so I'm. Whilst I think they will still go down, I think they'll have a real go at staying up, and they might very well stay up. I think it's. I'm a lot more enthusiastic about them than I am for Ajaccio, for example.
Let's talk about another team that I think we both might put into a relegation zone, or maybe you didn't actually. Clermont.
Mm.
You lose Mohamed Bayo, obviously, who's so important. You lose Salis Abdul Samed, who was also doing the work. Cedric Kuntunji, Hakim Zeratka, and then you recruit a flurry of players. Some of them could be great. Some of them we have no idea. You get Maxime Gonalon, a second youth at 33 years old. He was relegated with Granada and he's coming for free. You get Komnen, Hendrik, that no one knows, but if you look quickly at his stats when he played in Croatia for I think he's played all in all 3 years maybe. Then in Croatia, he scored 33 goals in 90 games. So he must know where the nets are. And then players like Mateus Veteka, Neto Borges, Mori Giao. It looks like a recruitment. If it was from Toulouse or Lens, you would be ecstatic because you would think the work has been done and they're the future talent that no one knows. But we haven't really seen that last year for Clermont. And we've seen instead Pascal Gastien really resting on his core Ligue 2 player that came to Ligue 1, and it worked because of this great start. It worked a lot thanks to Mohamed Bayo, who's now gone. And they haven't really replaced the type of player that Bayo was for them. Clermont, what's your feeling about them?
Well, first of all, that they're a walking miracle. The fact they stayed in Ligue 1 last season, playing the way they did, is exceptional. I mean, the way we talked about Ajaccio is the same we could talk about Clermont. They're a club that has never been built to be in Ligue 1, for whom Ligue 2 is their natural home, and that's probably the bottom half of Ligue 2 was probably their natural home. So Philippe Gastien's done an amazing job. I think I kind of admire what they've done in a way last season. I think they will go about it the same way, and I think Gastien will keep his job because he's too much of an icon there, and the board is realistic. So they actually, I had them 19th rather than Auxerre. I had Auxerre 19th. I think it's going to be a real struggle, but who knows? Some key players. I know they've lost, obviously, like you said, Bayo, Abdul Samed, and other key players. But there's still some players grow one season to the next, right? If it's your debut season in the top flight, you learn a lot about yourself. And if Gastien trusts those players, um, then who are we to doubt him?
They've
But
kept
the
Jim
the loss,
Avellina. They've kept
yeah,
those who they've kept
yeah,
Berthomier, who's old but who's talented.
yeah. So if he managed to stay up with those players last year, and I know Bayo was the headliner, the spearhead of that side, but Bayo also scored a decent amount of penalties that it slightly inflated. You've got to score them, but slightly inflated his goal tally. I mean, the talent's there clearly.
He was
Like
he
you said,
was he was that anchor man that
yeah,
when you play against Clermont, you know that you can't just ignore that huge threat up front. So that was
yeah,
a bit of a psychological advantage in my opinion that they've lost obviously.
yeah, yeah. So are they weaker than last season? Yes, probably, but Gastien over the last 3 years has shown that he can get players in who will will be successful. I mean, Bayo was nowhere 3 years ago, and
Yeah, that's
he's now
true.
moved to Lille. So they'll be counting on internal improvement, and he's shown that he can do that. So they'll still fall short for me, but they'll be entertaining at least. I mean, they'll have 3 or 4 games this season where they'll be hammered 4 or 5-0, but they'll also have the odd surprise here and there. And last year, they beat Marseille at the Velodrome, right? So
Mhm.
they're capable of surprising a few people still.
Another question mark in Ligue 1 this season, Angers, the SCO. They've lost some of their I don't know how you call them mascot, some of their most famous player Romain Thomas. We talked about Mangani, but they've also lost some of the young talents, namely Mohamed Ali Cho,
Mm.
Angelo Fulgini, Enzo Ebos, Jimmy Cabo, not that young but not that old either. Um, I don't know what to expect from them this season. We quickly talked about it offline before we started the pod. There's one player that I'm happy that is there, two of them, I should say. Is Yaya Fofana, the young goalkeeper, 21 years old,
Mm.
under 21 international in France, and Imad Abdelli, both of them coming from Le Havre because they had a good season in Ligue 2. But then
Mm.
besides that, they've given Adrien Hunou is, I don't know, third or fourth chance at doing something in France. They got Huntunji from Clermont, who didn't do bad, didn't do great.
Mm.
And it's a team that we've said it so many times last year. If they hadn't started by 6 wins or something like that, they probably would have not been in Ligue 1 at the end. And Baticle has a lot of work to do to try and keep that team in Ligue 1 this season.
He's lost his whole spine. I mean, he's lost Thomas and Traore at the back, who've been ever present since they've gone up, and who've been genuinely solid Ligue 1 defenders. I mean, Angers have always been in the game thanks to them. He's lost um, his heart in midfield with Thomas Mangani, who's their captain. They've lost all their duels in sort of, like you said, Fujini, Mohamed Ali Shaw. I mean, Shaw was still raw, but you could see the talent was there. And then the players like Cabo, Ibose, Pere Halaj. I mean, they've lost all those players I've named. What was that? 7 players. They would have started
Mhm.
every game last season. So that's a huge task for Baticle, and he's received players. Players who have come back as well are not interested in playing there. So Sada Tube, Bernardoni, who I'm not really sure why was kicked out in the first place, but Bernardoni is not wanted. Alioui is back. Bobichon. All those players. What are you going to do with them? I mean, you clearly parted from them last season because you didn't value them, and you can't expect those players to come back from disappointing loans to struggling clubs and then all of a sudden find their gear again. So I think I'm really pessimistic about Angers. I think I've got them 17th, but actually, the more I talk about them, the more I think Auxerre might have more of a chance than they do. Um, which is a shame because for a long time, they've been a club that's done a lot of things well, that's been stable. I quite like Gérard Baticle. I think he showed some interesting, um, showed
Ideas.
some interesting
Mhm.
pieces and ideas in his first season there, and he genuinely tried to get them on the front foot and play better football. and they were well organized, but I just can't, it's not a certainty in the same sense of as Ajaccio, but they're certainly in that. Out of the 6 teams we've mentioned, they're certainly
That looks scary.
that. Yeah, they look. They're gonna have to really finish strongly in the transfer market to have a chance.
The last team that we agreed would be fighting for relegation, and I don't think they're relegated, but let's see, is Troyes. Troyes, the City Football Group club of France, coached by Bruno Irles. Troyes, who lost Julian Biancone, Issa Kabore, who's back on loan to Man City, Youssouf Kone, who is at Lyon, but he wasn't actually that good. Ike Ugbo, sorry, is who I had in mind, who's left as well. And who didn't really recruit anyone. I mean, famously, they got Savio from Atletico and then shipped him to PSV, which looked like a dodgy City Football Club deal. And then they got some young player that come from countries and footballs that we don't watch often. Jackson Poroso from Boavista and Andreas Bruce from Brøndby in the Super League, which again we don't know what it's worth, but it's a team that doesn't look like they've really strengthened their squad. They lost a couple of players that had an impact last year, but they are the City Football Club. I don't think City Football Club would like their team to go in second division. They have a bit of continuity. They're keeping Tarje, Romini Kwame, Dingume, so they're keeping some players that were very important last year. They're keeping Adil Rami as well. I don't know if he was important.
Renaud Ripard,
big fan of Renaud Ripard. Actually,
Renaud
I'm
Ripard's a good
happy
player.
with that. But Xavier Savalerin, which I enjoy as well. But it is a bit of a question mark on Troyes, and you mentioned that Bruno Irles would probably be one of the coaches that can get the axe. I agree with you, because I don't think, like I said, I don't think the City Football Club wants his team in second division. They did it in Spain with Rijon, and it only lasted 1 year. And then when they're back in Liga, they gave them one of the best strikers that they have in their in their system with Tachi Castellanos. So I doubt that they're going to let Troyes go down. I'm a bit surprised that, unlike last year, we don't have the 4 or 5 players on loan from one city to come and help them, because I thought it was going to be a bit of the plan. I mean, the transfer is not over, and last year I think 6 players were loaned on the last day of August. But you already said that you think Irles would get the sack, but do you think it's a team that can still prevail in the end?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was surprised by those stories about Irles, and we talked about it offline, but I watched was it the penultimate game of the season that they had against PSG at the Parc des Princes, and I thought they were excellent, and they seemed to play according to the tactics put in place, and they seemed to play for each other. So when I saw those stories come out, I was a bit surprised. I mean, Biancone, Kabore, and Igbo are big losses. They were very impressive. I thought Igbo was a breath of fresh air, and Kabore just had non-stop legs, just galloping down his flank. So they're losses, but the spine of the team is still there. I'm sure they, like you said, they will be propped up by a couple of City loanees. So I think it's pretty much more of the same, I would expect. And if there's calm at the club and actually Irles turns things around, then considering how they ended the season, they should be safe. They'll always be in a relegation fight because they don't have the means to really push on, but I think they'll be safe. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how they go on. All right, that was our team that are going to fight to avoid relegation, and we said it, 4 teams will be relegated in Ligue 2 at the end of the season, which makes this fight for survival really interesting this year in Ligue 1. Don't hesitate to ask questions when you listen to the podcast. Subscribe, listen, like, go and check Le Classic Pod on Twitter, and let us know if you agree or disagree with the teams that we've mentioned into our potential teams being relegated at the end of the season. Stay tuned. There's another episode dropping soon where we'll talk about the team who will think will finish at the middle of the table.